Yes, good morning, all of you. My name is Bhatia, and this is the live class of BHIE 145. And we are going to cover in this class our Unit 3 and Unit 4. As you all have seen that on screen, this is coming just like Unit 3 Formation of Modern French State, because we are studying about the European history, okay, in BHIE 145. And earlier we have discussed about the history of European history, how it was formed at that time. And now in Unit 3, we will discuss about the formation of modern French state. In modern French state, if we are going to introduce about this, the process of centralization from the 16th century strengthened absolutism in France. And by the 18th century, the French monarchy under Louis XIV became the model of centralized absolutism based on feudal social structures. Because at that time, the structure was based on feudalism. The French Revolution brought about a complete destruction of feudal order and its state apparatus. The National Assembly and later Napoleon worked very hard and systematically to recast the old kingdom into a modern nation state. Attempts were made to transform institutions, legislation, administration, justice, bureaucracy, education, finances, and even religion also. And in our next slide, we are going to cover about the absolutist state and the abolition of feudal structure. How the society has abolished the feudal structure at that time, which was prevalent in the society in earlier period, and how they abolished the feudal system in from the society. During the ancient regime, the absolutism state developed a dual character. It assumed a class like role in relations of production to the extent that it competed with various elements of the feudal ruling class for control over peasantry, agriculture production. And secondly, the state benefited from the accumulation of wealth and was embroiled in process of social advancement by embodiment. As Francois Furet points out that through office holding, ennoblement and a centralized administration, the state was swallowing up the entire civil society. All the wealth of the bourgeoisie was drawn into its coffers in exchange for embodiment. The sales of offices for of the secretary, dury, and the rose of new heights. One of the first action of National Assembly was to destroy the relics of feudalism and aristocratic privileges in order to create a modern state of France. Because the people who were who were winning the privileges from their society, and the feudals were also winning the society according to their feudal lands, and they have a lot of rights in feudalism also. And in this, the Napoleon also had destroyed the rights of feudalism and the aristocratic privileges from the state of France. On the night of 4 August 1789, the Assembly, in an extraordinary session, voted to abolish seigneurial rights as well as the fiscal privileges of nobles, clergy, and towns and provinces. Next, we are going to discuss about the reconstruction of France, administrative and legal, both administrative and legal, in the reconstruction of France. The destruction of the old regime with all its administrative structure required a sweeping reorganization of administrative units. In place of the provincial and municipal regimes which had been abolished on 4 August 1789, a new system of local administration was immediately required. This was also desirable for managing the distribution of food and other matters which had a bearing on the public order. Napoleon's domestic measures achieved through reconstruction of France under the strong centralized government to restore peace and order. The pattern of executive power was one of authority dispensed downwards through the ranks of administrative hierarchy and not moving upwards through elections. There were five working sections of policy making, just like war, navy, interior, legislation, and finance. These were the five sections of policy making, and the ministers did not constitute a cabinet. Rather than they were individually responsible to the Council of State, directly under Napoleon's control. The consulate and empire created a police state, but it was more sophisticated in its functioning than its procedures. The Ministry of Police, founded in 1796, was headed by Fouché, and it administered four regional police divisions responsible for the secret police, censorship, prison surveillance, food prices, money market, although prefects and mayors of large towns retained separate police powers under the Ministry of Interior. Next, legal reforms under Napoleon became the instrument of unifying the nation and establishing the consular and imperial regime. Before the revolution, the monarchy had done little by way of legal unity. There were over 300 legal systems in France, and the country was ruled separately by the Roman law and customary law. Roman law, southern France, and customary law in north. And the convention during the revolution was strongly hostile at the authoritarianism of Roman law and favored greater liberalism of customary law. Napoleon's code struck a balance between two sources of law. He saw such virtue in Roman law as it suited his own authoritarianism nature. His code revealed a slight shift towards conservation, especially in family matters. Paternal authority was re established, divorce was retained but was subjected to strict limits. Women became the principal victims of this code, and the wives were subordinated to their husbands. Enjoying no part in administration or judicial acts, the equality of sex, proclaimed through not implemented by convention, was denied in Napoleon's code. While rejecting the principle of 1793, Napoleon's code adopted in its entirely the new property rights and the rights of citizenship suggested by the revolutionaries in 1789. The destruction of feudalism and the feudal privileges were endorsed, and the Code Napoleon, as it came to be called, included the Civil Code, Code of Civic Procedure, and the Code of Criminal Procedure. For the sake of unity, another important innovation tried by the National Assembly in 1791 involves the introduction of metric system of weights and measures, grams, meters, liters, etc. It had a lasting influence the world over. It brought much needed order and uniformity out of earlier variety by adopting convenient decimal divisions. Next, we are going to cover in this. Earlier, we have studied about Napoleon Code, how much changes he had done in their Napoleon Code. And next is the religious divide and concordat. What was the difference between the religious divide and concordat? That is, we are going to study. And the Catholic Church, two types of church were there prevalent at that time at when French Revolution was done, Catholic Church and Protestant Church. Okay, after French Revolution, the Martin Luther also came into the existence, and he had given a lot of reforms to the society in the religious point of view, in social point of view. and the economical point of view also. And next, we are going to study about religious divide. The Catholic Church was viewed as an important pillar of old regime, and so the revolutionary regime under the National Assembly implemented the civil constitution of clergy. Earlier, we have discussed about the three classes: the priest, clergy, nobles, and the peasants. And in peasants, two categories were there: free peasants and unfree peasants. Two types of peasants we have discussed about in our earlier class. In unit 1 and 2, we have discussed about the society which was prevalent at that time, just like first order, second order, and third order. First order, priest, clergy. Second order, nobles, and the third order peasants. First two orders were facing getting privileges, a lot of privileges from the society, first and second order. And the third order was only the social group which was giving tax to the society, which was giving tax to the particular first order and the second order. And now we are discussing about the law subordinate the church to the revolutionary government, and all members of the clergy was required to take an oath of loyalty to the government. This was resisted by some members of the clergy. Subsequently, the Catholic Church was completely nationalized and its property seized and put to sale. From this year, religion became a major issue that divided the French people. Because in Catholic Church, there were a lot of evils they were facing at that time. There were a lot of superstitions they were facing, the people were facing at that time. That's why the thing, what is divide, is coming at this time. And that is the main issue for the dividation of the French people. It seems Napoleon regarded the Catholic Church differently. He considered it a useful instrument of social control in instilling morality and discipline and preaching compliance to lawful authority. He reached an understanding with the Pope in 1801, and this is known as the Concordat. And it was a planned and dramatic gesture of reconciliation with the Catholic Church designed to pacify Catholics. Next, mobilization of citizens during the Terror and the Napoleonic Wars. Means during the Napoleon Wars, how the people were facing, the citizens were facing terror at that time, and why they mobilized one place to another place. What was the reason behind this? During the revolution, the National Assembly rejected the idea of conscription. Conscripted army. You have heard about the conscripted army. Yes, we will discuss about this. Following long debates on the subject, the deputies agreed to make no demands on French citizens for compulsory military service. However, two crises led to fresh calls for 1 year supplementary force of volunteers. However, two crises led to fresh calls for a 1 year supplementary force of volunteers. The first crisis was caused by King's flight in 1791, which led to the mobilization of a heavy urban contingent of active citizens or their younger counterparts with a military background for the National Guard. And the second was declaration of war in 1792, brought in recruits because of fervent patriotism and heavy propaganda against Austria. In early 1793, France was not only facing internal problems, pro-royalist insurrections, and the threat of intrigues from counter-revolutionary groups, but also experiences revolts along the frontier. There had been a six-fold invasion of France by the Allied forces. The revolution, the Republican government needed an additional 3 lakh troops to sustain war and the rule of terror. 3 lakhs. To meet the foreign crisis, save the Revolutionary Republic from its foreign and internal enemies, the Committee of Public Safety decreed a universal mobilization of all men from 18 to 25 of nation on 23rd August 1793. It declared that until the enemies of France was expelled from territory of Republic, all Frenchmen were in a state of permanent requisition for the army. The Revolutionary Army was an army of citizens from the radical revolutionaries and acted as a link between civil authorities and the armed forces to ensure requisition, fix food prices, procure food grains from the peasants, and to popularize the revolution in the countryside. It acted as an instrument of vengeance and vigilance over the enemies of the revolution. The idea of an annual conscription of citizens for regular troops started in 1793. This was due to the army shrinking in size of the absence of sustained mobilization, and France was pushed to a defensive posture along its line of occupation. Napoleon's conscription orders initially suggested an approach of persecution and flexibility, and the mayor of each community, along with his municipal council, was entrusted with the task of recommending the conscripts. And the department quotas, subdivided into small communal quotas, were initially filled by lottery or other means according to local preferences. This flexible view of recruitment was eventually abandoned as Napoleon remained constantly engaged in foreign wars and needed an army with sufficient number of soldiers. That's why they need a conscripted army at that time. That's why they gave importance to conscripted army for the navy. Next is new bureaucracy and educational institutions. How Napoleon was maintaining a new bureaucracy and how the educational reforms he was doing at that time. Administrative centralization required an effective and powerful bureaucracy. As we have seen, the process of centralization had started in France from the 16th century. However, the bureaucratic apparatus of the ancient regime developed through the sale of government jobs or venality of office. This remained its principal weakness. The destruction of old structure required a new bureaucratic structure. The process began in revolutionary period and was perfected under the Napoleonic regime. Means they required a new bureaucratic structure in their government because the principal and the government was getting weak at that time. Just to make strong to the government, they required a bureaucratic structure for the government. The revolutionary government had created 83 departments as the new units of administration. And in place of powerful royal officials like intendants, bailies, etc., a new three-tier uniform system of local government departments, districts, communes were created. At each level, local government officials were elected by active citizens. Even judge, tax collectors, parish priests, bishops were chosen on the basis of ballot. Have you listened about the ballot papers? Yes, this is that ballot paper. Napoleon personally worked on rationalizing the bureaucratic structure of France by developing a powerful centralized administrative machine. He retained the department administration but eliminated the local elected assemblies by new officials, the most important of which were the prefects. They were all appointed directly or indirectly by Napoleon himself, spectacularly uniformed and reflecting considerable pomp in their own right. The prefects were charged with vast responsibilities and granted immense power in their respective departments. Prefects became the link between Paris government and local government and function as centralized bureaucracy. And instead of being responsible to the department councils, the prefects were subjected to control from above. As we make prefects in our schools and in our colleges also, just the work of the prefects were to to make strong the rule that was going on in the particular area. Just like if we are going to discuss about the school and if we are going to discuss about the universities and colleges also, then the main role of prefects was the what was the main role of prefects? The main role of prefect was to make strong to the particular law that was going on in the school. Okay, that was the main role of prefects. That's why prefects played a very important role in the government of France also. And they were given the task of implementing unpopular policies such as installing new constitution curbs after the Concord, assessing and administrating unpopular taxes. And their activities also included compiling statistics for the ministers, supervising sub prefects and magistrates, selecting local administrative personnel, taking steps to promote regional economy, maintaining food supplies, and price controls in the market. The main role of prefects. Next, Napoleon's plan of education was to set a background of disruption. Against a background of disruption caused by a prolonged civil and military upheaval. The general educational system in the France was far from satisfactory during the ancient regime. After the closure of the old universities in early 1790s, revolutionaries attempt to construct a new educational structure to replace the old. They were all appointed directly or indirectly by Napoleon himself, spectacularly uniformed and reflecting considerable pomp in their own right. The prefects were charged with vast responsibilities and granted immense power in their respective departments. Yet they were fully dependent on the Minister of Interior and Police. Their activities also included compiling statistics for the ministers, supervising sub-prefects and magistrates. That type of activities they were doing in the market also, price control also, food supplies and the economy. And the Napoleon's plan of education was set against a background of disruption caused prolonged civil and military upheaval. Means he wanted to upward the educational system at that time. He wanted to improve the educational system at that time, and he wanted to remove the old regime which was facing a old type of education at that time. He wanted to improve the condition. They reopened medical schools in Paris, Strasbourg, Montpellier, Museum of Natural History, Central School of Public Works, which later became the famous École Polytechnique in 1795. Education became an important instrument for nation building under Napoleon. As far as elementary education was concerned, it became the joint responsibility of local government. And parents, in matters of funding, the rules for the establishment of private schools were made easier, and the Catholic teaching organizations were encouraged to share the responsibility of primary education. But the Napoleonic system was relatively indifferent to primary education. Means he focused a lot in primary education. And 1806, a fresh plan led to the creation of an imperial university in Paris. Unlike the traditional university, it was a single monolithic culture and hierarchical pyramid presided over the emperor's representatives, Grand Master, and charged with the supervision of all education, both public and private, throughout the empire. It appears that Napoleon treated education as a department to be centralized and administered from above according to the clear chain of command. He wanted his subjects to be properly trained in the field of military discipline, public administration, material productivity. He used educational reform as means of regulating minds to instill patriotism and loyalty to the state as well as a trained civil servant. Means Napoleon wanted to make a strong nation. And for making the strong nation, he thought that the main instrument for making nation building and all, education played a very important role at that time. And in education, he wanted to enhance the private also and the public education also. He wanted to enhance all type of education. He wanted to spread all type of education so that the people could read and write, could understand the feeling of the nationalism. He wanted to enhance the feeling of military discipline. He wanted to enhance the feeling of public administration, material productivity, so that he can make a nation with a strong all these powers. And in Unit 4, earlier we have studied about the educational system of Napoleon and how Napoleon faced a lot of problems and how he was maintaining the new education system at that time just to make his nation strong. Earlier we have studied about the prefects. He had given importance to the prefect system and prefects, the person who were supervising all the things which was prevalent in the society, in the economically also, in the religious point of view also. He was supervising all the things. And earlier we have studied about the activities of conscripted army. Conscripted army was played a very important role because some years he had decided that you will have to give in the conscripted army also. Otherwise, you have no any other option to do any other work. That's why conscripted army was the played a very important role at that time. Bureaucratic system, he changed the old bureaucratic system to new bureaucratic system. He changed the educational institution from old type to new type. Mobilization of citizens, because in the search of food, in search of jobs, in search of the how they sustain in their life, the people of that particular area, they mobilize one place to another place. He had given the importance to these things. On our unit 4, next unit, we are going to discuss about intellectual trends. Intellectual trends means you can see in this particular word intellectuals. Intellectuals means scholars, thinkers, believers, writers, okay, and so many ideas they have given in the society, in the political system, in the economical system, and in the development of Europe. So many thinkers came, just like Voltaire, just like Rousseau, and we will discuss in Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu, Charles de Montesquieu, and so many other thinkers also we will discuss in this unit, unit 4. Intellectual trends. Between mid 18th and mid 19th centuries, many thinkers and writers, so many thinkers and so many writers, through their ideas, through their writings, they influenced significantly socio political and economic developments in Europe. Developments of psychology, development of philo- philosophy, yes, development of philosophy, because we can take them philosophers also. We can give them a philosophers also, because development of philosophy, literature, art, science, they marked a new shift into European consciousness, and they reflected the beginning of modern world. It is considered a new epoch not only because of the American Revolution, the French Revolution, but primarily because it inaugurated a new intellectual culture which transformed the worldview of Europe. Political revolutions which took place in Europe during this period, to a large extent, were influenced by a new intellectual spirit. Have you heard about the Industrial Revolution? So many industries had opened in England. Have you heard about? Yes, that is that in the Industrial Revolution, which began first in England in the second half of 18th century, had a far-reaching impact on existing social and economic structures. And there was a strong reaction by a section of individuals, intellectuals, to the distress of the poor people. In this unit, we are going to introduce you to the development of new ideologies, some major thinkers, how their ideas challenged the prevailing institutions of power and marked the beginning of revolutionary thinking. We will discuss about these things in our unit 4. Next, the important term is enlightenment. Enlightenment means, what is the meaning of enlightenment? To gain the spiritual knowledge, to gain the real knowledge is known as enlightenment. Gautam Buddha, Mahavir Swami, and um, so many other philosophers, so many other thinkers. We are going to discuss about this. These thinkers were from India, and I am going to discuss about the thinkers which were connected to Europe. Rousseau, Voltaire, Montesquieu, those type of people we are going to discuss in this unit 4. 18th century witnessed a new awakening among the middle and upper classes that emerged as a social force. Economic prosperity, technological progress, new printing technique had influenced and promoted fresh ideas. In an age when questioning either government or church was unthinkable and punishable. Unthinkable and punishable under the law. Enlightenment thinkers criticized both. Enlightenment thinkers means when they got enlightenment and when they got the knowledge to know about the main and real thing. Enlightenment thinkers criticize both, which both punishable under the law and church was unthinkable and punishable. These type of questioning they were criticized them. They proposed a broad range of reforms to eliminate abuses, to promote individual freedom. They were critics of absolute monarchy, and they developed new ideas about government, new ideas about economy and the religion. Christian myths were replaced by scientific, rational arguments. Krishna myths, have you heard about that the Catholic Church and the priest and the clergy and the Pope of that particular church, he was distributing a type of letter from which he collect a lot of money on behalf of that letter, and he declared that all the people who will purchase that letter, they will be out of the sins which they have committed. Understood this? These type of myths I'm going to discuss about Christian myths. Christian myths were replaced by scientific, rational arguments. Religion was challenged and they believed that reason and science would improve lives. Human progress through logic, reason, criticism was their goal. The notion of divine right monarchy came under attack. Divine right monarchy came under attack. Next, in an essay, What is Enlightenment? Written in 1784, Immanuel Kant defined enlightenment as a revolt against ignorance and declared, Dare to know. Have the courage to use your own understanding as the guiding spirit of society. Kant wrote, The Enlightenment requires nothing but freedom, and the most innocent of all that may be called freedom. Freedom to make public use of one's reason in all matters. In all matters. In all matters. The most popular belief among philosophers and intellectuals of 18th century was their faith that the world worked without a word from God. World worked without the word from God. Charles D. Montesquieu, that is the main and the enlightened person of that particular area. We can say philosopher, we can say thinker, we can say writer. Charles D. Montesquieu, Denis Diderot, Voltaire, Jean-Jacques Rousseau were exponents of Enlightenment ideas and their works. Next, Enlightenment's ideas and their works had a profound influence in the shaping the intellectual milieu of Europe. Intellectual milieu of the Europe. Montesquieu was born into the family of provincial legal nobility of Guyenne near Bordeaux. Although he began his career as a lawyer and he took keen interest in learning various subjects and studying different civilizations. His work, The Spirit of Laws, published in 1848, had more than 2,000 references on enormous variety of subjects. He was a jurist, political philosopher, social critic. He was a jurist, political philosopher, and a social critic. Montesquieu grew up during the reign of Louis XIV, one of the most powerful absolutist ruler in Europe. He was able to understand the relation between politics. He was understand the relation between politics, economics, and religion. He rejected the theory of divine right advocated by autocratic monarchs. His major concern was to avoid despotism and to ensure liberty. Next one that is very important, that is Voltaire. Voltaire, time period 1694 to 1778. 1778. Voltaire was born in Paris and was an ardent advocate of religious freedom, tolerance, and civil liberties. Religious tolerance and civil liberties. Just a minute. And was an ardent advocate of religious freedom, tolerance, and civil liberties. He was influenced by ideas of philosopher John Locke, scientist Sir Isaac Newton. You have heard about scientist Isaac Newton, and Isaac Newton, whatever it is known as. He raised his voice against religious dogma, and intolerant government practices. In his essay upon the civil wars in France, he attacked the intolerance of religious institutions and proposed the separation of church and state. He rejected the theological framework and the importance given to political and military history and emphasized cultural history, history of arts, history of customs, and his writings, The Age of Louis XIV and Essay on the Custom and the Spirit of Nations, marked a shift from existing tradition of history writings, which was full of wars and the deeds of great men. In a treatise on toleration, he did not deny the existence of a supreme being, but in place of faith, he emphasized on reason in understanding God. He was against institutionalized religion. He advocated that, regardless of religion, all are brothers. He wrote, so long as the people do not care to exercise their freedom, those who wish to tyrannize will do so. For tyrants are active and ardent and will devote themselves in the name of any number of gods, religious and otherwise, to put shakeless upon sleeping men. Next is the writing on the freedom of expression. He said that it would be the height of madness to pretend to bring all mankind to think exactly in the same manner about metaphysics. We might, with much greater ease, conquer the whole universe by force of arms, then subject the minds of all the inhabitants of one single village. Next one is Rousseau. Rousseau, the time period of Rousseau is 1712 to 1778. He was born in Geneva but later moved to Paris. His most influential writings are The Social Contract, The Emile, and in Rousseau's opinion, human beings are born good but are later corrupted by the evils of the society. That is true. Writing on political theory, he began by saying, Man is born free and he is everywhere in chains. Man is born free and he is everywhere in chain. He talked about a collective general will which represented the common good and said that all citizens should be committed to this common good. AC बंद. He wrote, Each of us puts in his prison, in his person, and all his power in common under the supreme direction of the general will. And in our corporate capacity, we receive each member as an indivisible part of the whole. He believed that this will help in promoting liberty, equality, and fraternity. In a discourse on inequality, he showed how, with the growth of civilization, wealth, power, social privilege created inequalities in modern society. He believed that good government must have the freedom of all its citizens at its most fundamental objective. Laws should be universally applicable to all members of the state, and they should ensure that individual freedom is upheld. It is said that the main inspiration of French Revolution came from Rousseau's ideas, very revolutionary ideas he was giving to the society. Diderot, 1713 to 1784. He was a French philosopher and one of the major thinkers of Enlightenment period. He did not hesitate to disagree with the church. He did not hesitate to disagree with the church because he always was not agree with the works of the church. Although he did not question good existence, but he wrote, the manner of ordering the true God ought never to deviate from reason. He has desired it to be used even in the judgment of what is suitable to do or not to do in respect to him. Next is liberalism. Next is utilitarianism. And the last is laissez faire. Next is socialism also. These three important terms we are going to discuss about in this class. Liberalism. What is liberalism? Compared to liberalism to 20th century, the liberalism of late 18th and mid 19th century is described as classical liberalism. The movement for liberalism grew in a particular historical context, and ideas of John Locke contributed greatly to development of classical liberalism. In John Locke's view, individuals have certain fundamental rights: right to life, liberty, prosperity, property, which are also described as natural rights. Classical liberalism gave primary emphasis on securing individual freedom by curbing power of the state. And it would be pertinent here to refer to Lord's Action's definition on individual liberty. By liberty, I mean the assurance that every man shall be protected in doing what he believes in his duty against the influence of authority and custom and opinion. Action believed that securing liberty is the highest political end. Classical liberals advocated for a social order in which individual liberty can be maximized. Means, what do you mean by liberalism? Liberalism is a term by which a people should be very liberal, very humble to the society of that particular area. That is a liberalism. Next is utilitarianism. And utilitarianism is defined as a philosophy which believes that it is overall utility of maximizing happiness, which solely determines the worth of an action. Any future action should follow the course of action from the past, which ensured the greatest happiness of greatest number. Government which fosters the greatest happiness of the greatest number is the best government. Utilitarianism began as a philosophy of human happiness, which emphasized the role of liberty in the pursuit of happiness. Jeremy Bentham was the founder of utilitarianism philosophy and said that in place of unsustained religious beliefs and unreliable traditions, utilitarianism was committed to an objective study of human behavior. In his work, Introduction to the Principle of Morals and Legislation, he criticized legal and political institutions. Who? Bentham. Based on principle of utility, Bentham tried to find a rational approach to legislation actions. In his first publication in 1776, entitled A Fragment on Government, Bentham set the goal of his ideology by stating that it is the greatest happiness of greatest number that is the measure of right and wrong. Next is laissez-faire. Laissez-faire, in opposition to feudalism and the doctrine of mercantilism, which believed in trade restrictions, government regulations to product, and minimum wage law. The philosophy of laissez-faire or free trade developed in late 18th century. Believers in free economy were of opinion that too many regulations prevent healthy competition, work against economic progress. Early exponents of laissez-faire were the physiocrats in France. Physiocrats were a group of economists during the second half of 18th century. In contrast to emphasize on trade of mercantilist physiocrats believed in agriculture as the economic foundation of nature's wealth. They were against regulation of commerce and protective tariffs. They were advocated that self-interest was the guiding force in an economy and there should not be restriction on individual efforts to achieve a desired goal. Francois Casne. Francois Casne, that was a French economist, was the founder of physiocratic school of thought. However, it was Adam Smith, a Scottish philosopher, who was considered the most important ideologue of laissez-faire philosophy. Influenced by economic ideas of Quasney, Adam Smith provided justification for free economy and capitalism. In his book Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, Smith refuted mercantilist arguments that protectionist tariff serve the economic interest of a nation. According to Adam Smith, desire for wealth govern human activity. Self-interest or profit is the driving force behind any task performed by an individual. He wrote, "It is not from the benevolence of brewer or the baker. We expect our dinner, but from our regard to their self-interest." Next one is David Ricardo and Thomas Malthus. David Ricardo and Thomas Malthus followed Smith's laissez-faire economics. How? However, in contrast to the ideas of Smith, Ricardo found society highly competitive where workers were disadvantaged in the terms of wages. His understanding of iron law of wages suggests that all attempts to increase subsistence of workers will be fertile. Next one is the very important thing, that is socialism. Socialism is very important matter in this, but the point is very important, the socialism. Other intellectuals were skeptical of the liberal ideology and doubt the formulation about progress advocated by liberals. Based on a new ideology of progress and common ownership, these thinkers were against selfish individualism, which claimed to promote individual happiness. The early socialists Saint Simon, Charles Fourier, Robert Owen represented this kind of thinking. They argued that industrial society was not only just unjust, but that is worked against the interest of the poor. The French Revolution, Industrial Revolution provided immediate background to the birth of socialist ideas in Europe. With new technology, means of production, basic social structure and economic relationship started changing all over Europe. The importance of work, labor, production, their relation to politics, society was an area of major concern for the early societies. They were concerned of social inequality, child labor, distress of poor. Next, Saint Simon was born in Paris and his ideas were conditioned by the feudal and military order of that period. He advocated for an economic system where in industry would be controlled by government. He suggested a reorganization of society organized for productive labor for the most capable men, with the elites leading a peaceful process of industrialization. He supported a social hierarchy in which one would be placed in society according to one's capacity of work. One would be placed in society according to one's capacity of work. He was not opposed to social hierarchy and private ownership. He prescribed reorganization of society for achieving physical and moral improvement of the poor. Simon did not visualize any conflict between capital and labor. Charles Fourier. Charles Fourier, a contemporary of Saint Simon, was critical of effects of industry. He envisages reconstruction of society based on communal association of agricultural producers known as phalanges. Phalanges, in his theory of social organization, Fourier stated that liberty, unless enjoyed by all, is unreal and illusory. To secure liberty, a social order is necessary. Robert Owen, who had seen closely the effect of industrialization on the workers in Britain, he was not against industrialization, but advocated paternalistic policies for improvement in the lives of working classes. Rejecting Christianity, custom, he believed in reason and natural order and hoped that with the change of environment, human nature would also change. With the change of environment, human nature also change. Karl Marx, that was very important for the economy, for the society, and for the religion also. Karl Marx played a very important role. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels proposed that in capitalist society, the growing distance between the capitalist and the working class would lead to class struggle. And through class struggle, the workers would be able to establish their rights. Their ideas were presented in the Communist Manifesto that was published in 1848. We are not going to explain in this unit the development of communism. What is important to note in this context is that the vision of a world by the early socialists where all will be happy was far from reality. It was Karl Marx who gave new meaning to socialism by advocating proletarian revolution for the overthrow of capitalism. That's it. We have studied Unit 3 and Unit 4 about the European history, and in Unit 4 we have discussed about what we have discussed about in Unit 4. Let me see. In Unit 4, we have discussed about intellectual trends. And in intellectual trends, we have discussed about a lot of philosophers, their literature, their art, and their science, how they maintain themselves. We have discussed about the importance of industrial revolution also, and we have discussed about the enlightenment, which the thinkers and philosophers got, and they gave a new direction to the society. We have discussed about Rousseau, about Voltaire, about John Locke, and we have discussed about Bentham, and we have discussed about utilitarianism and laissez-faire and socialism also. We have discussed a lot of things in Unit 3 and Unit 4, and in our next class we will study about Unit 5 and Unit 6 about the European history. And we have discussed about Charles Fourier also. We have discussed about Robert Owen also. We have discussed a lot of things related to these thinkers, related to these writers, and we have discussed about Karl Marx also. He played a very important role in the capitalist society, and what was the growing distance between the capitalist and the working class? They would lead to class struggle, and through class struggle, the workers would be able to establish their rights. He had given the rights, he helped in gaining rights for the workers at that particular time period. And in 1848, the Communist Manifesto was published. And in that book, the idea of Karl Marx and other philosophers also presented in that particular work. Now we are going to stop this class and we will cover our unit 5 and unit 6 in our next class. So thank you. Have a nice day.